ST your engines. It's F1 on the Atari ST Show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Atari ST Show. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're talking about F1 World Championships.
Yes, sir.
You know, Aaron, auto racing, popular all over the world. But in America, we don't really care as a nation about F1. We're more into the NASCAR scene, and to a much, much smaller extent, the IndyCar scene, like the Indy 500. Why is it, do you think, F1 never really took off here in the US of A?
You know, well, I mean, I think there was a time where it was, I think it has its audience. I think F1's a little bit like soccer, let's say, right? It has an audience. I think the audience is growing, you know, and at some point in the past, in the distant past, there was an audience then too, but it sort of went away. Because remember, soccer in America, it started to have like a surge in like the 70s. Remember that we had a pro league, the Pele, and all that stuff. Right. And then it was like, and then it went, bro, it tanked, right? And then with the rise in NFL and stuff. And I think F1 was sort of like that. But I mean, there are people that dig it, you know.
It's still a very niche sport compared to NASCAR and compared to the Indy 500.
Yes,
for example,
absolutely.
For people that don't know, you get NASCAR on network TV. I think it's on Fox. I think Fox has the license for it. You don't get any F1 on network TV. You don't get F1 drivers advertising things on commercials. It's just not nearly as big of a sport as NASCAR is. And it's a shame because as an F1 fan myself, I think it's an infinitely better sport than NASCAR. It's hard to think of a less exciting way to race than the way they do it in NASCAR. A million laps around an oval. That's not how I roll. Bam.
I don't like laps. I don't like laps. Period. If I'm honest, to me, I can go out and watch cars drive by on the interstate and they can by fast. I know there's a thing about going there live and feeling it. At least with F1, yes, I agree with you in terms of that NASCAR. NASCAR, when I was growing up, was pretty cool because it'd be these hicks. They would come out with their souped up crap and you'd be like, wow, look at this thing. Some would be awesome, you know, but then like they streamlined it, made it safer, but they also made it less fun to watch, you know. Yeah. To me,
and people make the same claims about pretty much any form of racing. Anytime you attempt to make something safer, you also make it lamer by design.
Yeah, funny car racing's the same thing. The only sports drive wise, I like stuff like the Carpocalypse stuff where you do crazy stuff with cars. I like demolition derbies. I like stuff like that. I'm not so into like racing, but I will say if I'm going to sit down and watch a race, some kind of F1 race, I occasionally will sit down and watch. So I will say that is one I'll occasionally catch.
Did you ever go to the monster truck rallies or anything like that when you were a kid?
You know, it's funny because they tried to cross that over with wrestling, you know, for a long time because a lot of wrestlers had monster trucks.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Macho Man and Hulk and the Giant, they all had monster trucks. And there's even a wrestler that drove a monster truck and probably still does, Medusa Michelli. She's got her own monster truck, and she's a monster truck pro driver now. She was a world champion for a while.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's the one for you to look up, Medusa. But for me, it just never made the cut. I thought about taking the kid to go see. I've never seen them live except for like at a fair or something. But they're so loud, and the kid's just not into it. He does not want to go see him. So I was like, I don't really blame him. And so we don't.
That was something when I was a kid. It excited me, but looking back on it, I know I would have hated it if I went there. Because you're right, it's extremely loud, and once you see a monster truck crush a couple cars, I mean, what else is there left to see? I mean, they bring out that big robot Godzilla thing that breathes fire.
Carosaurus or whatever, Truckosaurus,
one-trick pony, you know.
Well, I mean, if you watch monster trucks race, like they will kill themselves. Those things jump like 2 stories in the air and then just fall over. I'm always like, the drivers are nuts. I'm like, who's doing this? They just got some hillbillies that drive these things. But I mean, I think there's fun to be had. It's just like tractor pulls or any of that stuff. I mean, there's an audience for it, but it ain't me.
What is the weirdest like competition thing you've ever seen in person?
In person?
Yeah, have you ever seen like a World's Strongest Man or anything like that in person? I'm lame. I haven't been to anything.
The most insane, wackiest thing I ever saw in person would have been that death match in that warehouse in the back alleys of Charleston, where it was just like, that was the seediest, most illegal thing I've been to, probably. Although I used to go to this wrestling show in Louisville, and it was illegal to have these shows, these hardcore shows, and it was in this like hangar or something. And it was hot as heck in there. It'd be the summer, and they'd be in there wrestling. This is where they'd throw each other in vats of like lobsters and mouse traps and all this crap. But what was funny is anytime anybody saw a cop coming by or anything that looked like a cop car, some sucker would run over and close the doors. It takes like 10 guys. It's like ancient Rome, they're closing these doors, and then somebody'd be like, all clear, and then open them. They had special geeks to work the door at this place, so that was pretty illegal too, I guess.
At that place, if you were working the door, you were working the door.
Yeah, you got good one, Boat. I like it.
Let's talk about Formula One, Aaron.
Catchy tune.
Yeah. So, Formula One. This game was released way back in 1993 on the Atari ST. It was developed by Lancor, and it was programmed by Daniel Markrach, who also worked on Vroom, because, newsflash, this is the same game, pretty much. The graphics were done by Dominique Sablon, who did the graphics for Tennis Cup, and he also did the graphics for Chicago 90, which is another racing game, and also a game which I'm sure you would enjoy called Killdozer. Does that name speak to you?
There's a movie called that, so now I'm intrigued.
I think there's also a band called that. Killdozer are popular. Butch Vig, the guy that produced Nevermind and Siamese Dream, a bunch of alternative albums, he got his start producing records for this band called Killdozer.
It's a good name. You can't deny that.
It was published on the 16-bit computers by Domark. Domark actually acquired the Vroom game from Lancor and essentially reskinned it with the license. That is how this game came to be. Domark, very prolific publishers of software. They published almost 100 games for the ST, including such varied titles as Castle Master, which we were just talking about on the Amigos. They did a bunch of arcade ports like Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. They dipped their toe into some board game adaptations. They did Pictionary for the Atari ST. Boy, what kind of straits are you in if you're relying on your Atari ST to play Pictionary?
It's the same people that bought like Rubik's Cube for the old Atari 2600 or Tic-Tac-Toe,
What are we doing? Probably the most famous title they published is Prince of Persia. I would say that's a real stalwart in the library of the Atari ST. Anyway,
I think they also did. They may have been involved in some of the Star Wars arcade ports as well.
Oh, I think you're right. You're right. And of course,
I seem to remember their name.
On the 8-bit computers, they did tons and tons of stuff. They published Lords of Midnight for the ZX Spectrum, a whole bunch of stuff. So Domark, they does any name sound more European than Domark?
It sounds dopey. Every time I hear it, because it sounds so much like dopey or dough.
That name doesn't fly in America.
No.
You can only get away with that in Europe. So anyway, Formula One. What is this game? This is a racing game, surprise, where you simulate the career of a Formula One driver and you compete against the other teams and drivers of the day. This is the only game, I believe, that has the official F1 license for the Atari ST. So all of the other racers and all the other teams were real and current for the 1993 season. Yeah. Aaron, just in general, does that make a big difference to you when you play a sports game of any kind? Does having an official license make a difference?
Hell yeah. Absolutely. I mean, again, I'm not a big F1 guy, but if I'm playing like a baseball game or something, I don't want And I don't want like Bill Smithy. I want Ken Griffey. I don't want Pete Schmoes. I want Pete Rose. I want the real guys in there. And so if I'm an F1 guy, I probably don't want, Tilly Thomerson. I want Nigel Mansell or somebody. I can understand that. And the real teams, all that crap makes a difference. Yes. And the racetrack, all that stuff, all the licensing stuff is a big deal.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think Formula One, even more so than a team sports game, because it's such a part of the sport, seeing those logos, seeing the Ferrari logo, the Williams logo. And those are things that you can't really fake as easily as having, like, for example, for an unlicensed baseball game, you can still have the team colors. And like you said, you can have your Willie Flays or whatever. You can sort of skirt around it. But for F1, I think it's really, they made the right move. Whatever they paid for the license, they got their money's worth.
I mean, if you're not going to get the license, or you just don't show, you don't have a screen that has like a list of all the names. You just avoid it,
Right. Yeah. So, Aaron, when you booted this thing up for the first time, what were your thoughts? Because you're a racing game veteran. You've played tons of these things. Were you impressed right off the bat?
Well, I remembered this game because when it came up, I remember this one thing about this game that always gets me, and it's the way the motion of the track and stuff. It's like watching a cobra in a basket. There's a hypnotic effect to it.
I like that analogy.
I remember from sure enough, I looked back, and we actually, of course, it was us. And it was the old Amigos. So instead of covering this game, we covered 4 games in one episode. And we covered Vroom multiplayer, F1, and then the F1 sequel that came out on the consoles and on Amiga. And so we had played it before. And I'll tell you, Boat, I was wondering how this was going to play on the ST. Because the ST is sort of like, this is the kind of game that it should do well. And I was pleased. Initially, my initial thoughts were, this is doing it for me thus far, Boat.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a game that sort of skirts the line between 100% simulation and 100% arcade action. Mm-hmm. It threads the needle, I think, pretty well. This is a game that gives you lots of modes and lots of options. But when it comes down to it, it doesn't go full out with the simulation as much as maybe a Microprose F1 game does. For example, there's no switching between your team members like that game does. You're essentially one driver in one car on this game. This game has, just to go into a little bit of what's available here, you've got training mode. Training mode it's a solo mode where you can test your car, put it on the track, ensure that you've set it up like you want it. In this game, you do have some car setup options.
Yeah,
you
minimal.
can set your wing, your wing settings, your gearbox, and your tires. So tire settings, hard, medium, or soft. If you put hard tires on there, they wear more slowly, but you don't get a lot of cornering action. Soft tires, of course, they'll do the opposite. They'll corner well, but they'll wear out.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and then you've got your medium tires. I learned all this. I got into F1 2 or 3 years ago, and much like when I get into anything, I learn everything I can about it. Watch it for a couple months, and then leave it high and dry.
Then you're out.
I'm out.
Now, explain. I'm guessing the wings like help you stick to the road. Is that what?
Yeah, that's it. What they do is they create downforce.
They also kill Paul McCartney's career.
That's true. It's sort of interesting when you think about the way that the wing is shaped on a car. It's like the opposite of a plane. With a wing on a plane, it keeps the plane up in the air.
Yeah.
The opposite with a car. And if you want cars with the best cornering, you don't want that downforce to press your car down so much that you can't turn it. So again, it's trade-offs. The gearbox is a simple manual or automatic. I always played this with the automatic transmission because I'm a weenie.
Yes, me too.
I'm not up to shifting gears when I got so many other things to worry about.
I can't drive a stick.
No. And moving on to the other modes, you've got demo mode. Demo mode is cool because you can not only test your car out without you being involved, so you can kind of see what its optimal performance is on the track, but it also lets you kind of scope out a track so you can plan out your racing lines, your turn in, your apex, your exit. I wish that more games had this kind of demo mode, because sometimes it's nice just to kick back, watch somebody play the track so you have an idea of what to expect before you jump in. And of course, it's especially important in F1 games because the courses vary so much. You've got Monaco. When they race in Monaco, they basically close down the whole city, the race takes place on the streets. And then there's Silverstone in the UK, which is it's a traditional. Well, it's about as close to a traditional oval track as F1 gets. It's not an oval shape, but it's more of a circuit type course. So the heart of the actual racing game, though, is championship mode. So you can either choose to race a single circuit, or you can go through the whole season of 12. It's worth noting that this is one of the game's faults. F1 has changed a lot over the years, and much like all professional sports, it gets bigger. In real F1 back in 1993, there were 16 races. I think for space reasons, space considerations, this is only a one-disc game. They were only able to put 12 courses on there. I still think 12 courses is still a goodly amount of courses, especially when you consider each one looks so good. I mean, were you pretty impressed with the way these tracks looked, Aaron?
Well, I mean, there's a template that goes along with the track. Now, with that said, it's not like you're going to get like super unique backgrounds for each one. However, and this is me not knowing much about actual real life tracks, okay? The tracks were varied and were quite different, I thought, for the most part, and some were real difficult too.
Well,
so I'm assuming these are actual tracks like that exist in the real world.
Here's where I'm going to disagree with you pretty hard on this. I think that these tracks, first of all, the tracks themselves are exact copies of the F1 tracks, which is great. But
yeah, I figured
what sets this game apart is every single background is different. There's 16 different backgrounds that you see. You see cityscapes. In the cityscapes, sometimes they have sort of agrarian compounds on the outskirts. You see high rises. In France, for example, there's a hot air balloon. I think in Australia, there's a plane that's flying across. You don't get that in any other racing game that I've ever played from this era, that degree of detail in the backgrounds. I mean, with games like Lotus, you don't get any background at all, or it's just a very basic abstract background. You don't get anything like this.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm just saying, like, I watched every track, all right, to check them out. And there are a few little. I mean, it's not like there is something there. I'm not gonna say you're wrong. It looks good. I'm not gonna disagree with you. They did a good job. It makes each track feel unique. I will say that.
Now, what you don't get on these tracks that you do get in the real in the real tracks is any sort of scenery that is directly next to the track.
Right.
For example, when you're driving through Monaco, you don't drive through the streets of Monaco and pass by. So, it's not like San Francisco Rush. Let's be honest. This is a game from 1993. It's just, it can't offer that kind of fidelity.
They do have billboards, trees, signs,
archways,
tunnels, stuff like that.
Yeah, there are things to look at, but it's not like the backgrounds where the backgrounds sort of reflect the real course, what you might see on the real course.
Yeah.
So the points system here is the same as real F1. So in F1 racing, when you win, you get 10 points. You get 6 for second place, all the way down to 6th place, which gets 1 point. So as long as you get at least 6, you get something. Then there's 2 parallel trophies in F1 racing. You have the overall trophy, which goes to a single person, and then there's something called the Constructors' Championship, which is a totally separate award that gets awarded to the team. So F1, another reason why F1 is just a fascinating sport to watch compared to other auto racing sports is that you've got these 2 guys that are on a team, and they, in theory, they work together unless they're both doing real well. And then sometimes they'll ignore what their team instructor says, and they'll sort of be aggressive because they want to win just as much as their other team. So they're on a team, but sometimes they can still be rivals. Sometimes they fight, and it's that interplay which has made that the Netflix Driven to Succeed, I think is what it's called, or Drive to Survive. There's a Netflix series that goes along with each F1 season, although it's a season behind, that talks about this team interplay. And unfortunately, in this game, they don't really delve into that too much. There's no way to sort of see who your teammate is, to do any shenanigans, to protect your teammate or help them out. There's nothing like that in this game. But you still do get those points that go towards the Constructors' Championship. The last mode is arcade mode, okay? Aaron, do you want to explain arcade mode?
Well, it's pretty much the arcade mode is just you're not in. There's not a points thing, as far as I can tell. There's not a
it's totally different. So
well,
the arcade mode is a totally different game. The arcade mode, you have an allocation of cars that you have to pass within a certain amount of laps on the track. So you get the way that this game sets your position up is totally different. And sort of dumb compared to any other racing game, where normally you have a thing that says POS and then you'll have a fraction. So if you're in last place, you'll be like 16 out of 16, and then as you go up, it'll be 15, 14, all the way up to 1. In this game, you have a series of cars, okay? You'll have 16 cars. When you're playing championship mode, you'll have 16 cars on there. And what you do, or actually, I can't remember how many, it might be 12. But anyway, as you move through the pack, your car is represented by a red car, and you will see it move from the last green car all the way up to the first green car. It's really impossible to tell at a glance, which is all you can really give your HUD, where you are in the pack. But all that is to set up what arcade mode is. In arcade mode, you start out, and your goal is not to win the race. Your goal is just to pass a certain amount of cars. It's very similar. If you think about like the way that pole position was, there were an infinite number of racers on the track, and you passed the racers, but it didn't really matter. Well, in this game, there's an infinite number of racers on the track, but you passed. Actually, I guess in pole position, I think you did get a passing bonus for each one, so it sort of calls back to that. But all you have to do is do the certain number of laps, and you have to pass like 6 or 7 cars. Then any additional cars you pass past that, you get surplus points. That's the way that arcade mode works. It's not really racing. It's more like the harbinger of things to come with games like Burnout, where you had a certain number of cars that you needed to wreck before, within a certain set of time.
I'm not even sure I noticed this when I played it, because I was wondering when I switched over. I'm like, I mean, you don't qualify. But I was like, what is this? What's happening here? So you just explained it to me, because I wasn't even sure what was going on there. Yeah. I noticed the car markers. I was like, so this is sort of like Turbo or something back in the old days. Yeah,
right. It is. It does make you think of Turbo for sure.
Mostly, I wanted to play the point stuff just so I could get in there and figure out how it works. So that's mostly what I played.
Now, as far as the game, what did I like? What did I dislike? The game is colorful. The game is fast. The game is smooth. I mean, this game does most of what you want in a racing game. The game gives you an overall map of the course, which is extremely useful. It's not any bigger than it has to be, but it shows you where your car is, and it shows you what sort of turns are coming up. These hairpin turns are murder in F1, and it shows you what you need to watch out for. The HUD is large. It takes up a full third of the screen, but you expect that with a racing game. A lot of racing games, it didn't really get in the way. I feel like they probably could have done without the way that they did the positioning, but that's a small quibble. I like the fact that you can pit in this game. And when you pit, they don't make it too difficult. You pull into the lane, and then there are keyboard commands that you have to press. For example, I think you press T to get new tires. You press G to get more gas. Yeah. And you see the little guy come up, and he fills it up, and it's a neat little graphical thing. I thought that part of the game was handled very well. Your gas gauge is not obtrusive. It shows you exactly what you need at a glance. Where this game falls short is the user interface to get to the game. You get a 3-column view when you first load up the game, and it's sort of like Lotus, where you set everything up. But what makes it difficult is the course selection. So in the course selection, if you were a normal thinking person, you'd have a thing that says select course, and then you'd go to a different screen, and then it would give you a list of the courses to choose. You'd select that course or a number of courses and then go back to this screen. The way that course selection works in the ST version of the game is that you have 6 GPs. Each GP has 2 legs, and each one of those legs represents a different race. So 6 times 2 is 12. There's no way of knowing, I guess maybe you could consult the manual, what race you want to race, if you want to just race one race, which one of the GPs and legs it is. First of all, it took me a while to figure out what was going on and how to overcome that. And then when I did figure it out, I was like, wow, that's real dumb. Aaron, did you have trouble with that?
I didn't have too much. Well, I mean, what I figured out was, well, this is going to be a pain in the butt to see all the courses, basically. And so, yeah, I'm like you. I'm like, I just had to sort of feel my way through. I thought most of the screen, aside from that, was okay. It's pretty self-explanatory. I got a spider going in front of my camera. It's pretty self-explanatory for most of the things. Joystick or mouse, manual, automatic, how many laps, how many players, blah, blah, blah. And then, like you said, this is also where you do your car options. So I thought it was okay, but yes, what would I have liked to have seen? A nice big screen that had all the tracks and maybe even had a little blurb about the tracks and that you could scroll through. Something nice. It could have been done, a lot better, actually. So I would agree with you on that. That is the least effective part of the menu. The rest of it I thought was okay.
Yeah. The other thing that I don't like about this game, and this is not part of the menu, is that you cannot choose the number of laps that you want to play in championship mode.
Yes,
you have to go you have to go full out, and it just takes forever.
I don't like to play it that long.
It literally takes as long as racing a real F1 race. I mean, in a real F1 race, I think there's 70 some laps, but I mean, 5 lap, these are long lap courses. So you're going to spend 15 or 20 minutes per course, going through all these races. I didn't attempt to save my game. I would think that there would be some way to save it, but I didn't. That's one of the things that I forgot to investigate. Boy, you want to talk about a long slog if there's no way to save your game on this. You're going to spend it some time, or you'll do the old, I'll keep the computer turned on forever routine.
Yeah, listen, I'm glad you mentioned that, because if I had a problem with this game, aside from the inefficient track selection, it is the fact that you have to play it for so long, and especially if you're actually trying to compete for points or whatever, and you're just getting killed out there. I hate it. I hated having to play that many laps. They needed that something, and I can understand for a purist or whatever, but I'm an impurist. I don't want that. It takes too freaking long. So I'm going to agree that was my least favorite part of the entire game.
One other things that I like about this game, the other cars are different colors. You'd think that in racing games that would be a given, but in lots of racing games that's not a given.
They look cool too.
Yeah, and the cars are well modeled. Even your little hands on the wheel, you've got a cluster, a gauge cluster on your dashboard, or the in-car dashboard, that looks cool. That's how you see how fast you're going and stuff like that. So altogether, I thought this was a stellar racing game. Let's take a look at some of the other versions, Aaron.
Before we move up the line, I want to mention a couple things real quick.
Okay, man.
The one thing that I got to give this game credit for, because it runs fast, and you can even hit the turbo mode. I don't know if you tried that, and it's like ultra fast. I mean, I got to give it credit.
And what's funny is that in the manual it says, and of course there's no turbo in F1, but now they have this DFS time period where you can. It's essentially turbo. I think there's something that they do with the wing where they adjust the wing, and it's effectively a turbo.
Yeah, and then I also you got to give credit to the 2-player simultaneous on screen. That's That's cool. I mean, 'cause
Yep.
both of them run fast. And the funny thing is, I did this a couple times. I would race against the computer in that mode. That was kind of fun. You could see what they were doing. So you're in split screen. It's not something you want to do every time, but it was kind of neat. So I thought that was a fun aspect. The little car that represents you, it's not the best. Like, I know they did it because you need to have the certain amount of information on your car. That's probably one of my less favorite aspects of the graphics is the.
Would you have liked that to have been bigger?
I don't know what I want. I mean, that's the thing. I'm not going to dock any points because I don't know what I want, but it looks a little bit goofy to me. Also, the wrecks are, which is funny because the sequel to this, they just got rid of the wrecks and you just basically hit stuff and you just stop. And on this, you'll hit stuff and you'll bounce.
See,
or you'll hit stuff and your tires will fall off.
Of course, it's completely ridiculous, but
yeah.
I like any game that gets you back in the action.
Yeah.
Relatively quickly is a win for me.
I agree.
Any game that's not like pole position where you have to watch your whole car explode. And there are some antics that you get up to. Like if you hit another car from behind, which never happens in F1. I mean, like they have strict rules about, there's no rubbing in F1. But you'll fly up into the air. There's seemingly your car takes no damage.
Yeah, and you'll fly off the course. If you can get back on without hitting anything, you're good to go.
Yeah.
A lot of these games, one of my biggest pet peeves, and you've heard me say this a million times, but is the angle that you look at when you race, right? A lot of games get it wrong, and this game, normally I would be like, man, this angle is really low, but this game, the engine, the way they've got it, it works great. So like your view angle is great. And one thing this game does better than almost any game of the era is like hills. I mean, the change in elevation.
You do get a sense of that. Mm-hmm.
It's hypnotic, and the sense of speed in this. Listen, you've got to give these guys credit. I mean, it feels like you've got a rocket strapped to your butt. I mean, you're moving down this track, and as the other cars go by in the tunnels and all the stuff that's over the track, you really feel like you're moving. I mean, and your engine, the way they've got it timed out, when you get your car like fully opened up, I mean, it feels like you're like could die at any moment because you're going so fast. And I just love that aspect of it. It's so much fun. I'm going to say, am I great at this game? No. But is it visually one of my favorite racing games? Yes. I don't know why I don't ever hear anybody talk about these games. I said the same thing when we talked about it on the Amigos. Like, this game, I can't figure out why it didn't get more attention now. I think it still is fun to play, and it's a good looker. It supports mouse control, if that's your thing. So it gives you a lot of options, which I approve of, Boat.
Yeah. All right, you ready to take a look at some of the port comparisons?
Sure. The first up here, I had to do it. This is the ST and the Amiga. They're pretty much, from what I read, they're effectively almost identical. The Amiga was ported from the ST. And so you've got a very similar look here, but wouldn't you say? Do you remember playing this on the Amiga back in the day?
I played this this week.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I actually think it looks slightly worse, to be honest with you.
What do you not like?
Everything has been redrawn.
Yeah.
Your car is a little bit smaller on the screen. The backgrounds are not nearly as colorful. They really sort of jobbed out when they drew these backgrounds. And the game runs faster on the Amiga, but I think it runs a little bit too fast, to be honest with you.
It's not as smooth, frankly.
Yeah.
When we played this back in the day, I was pretty impressed with it. But I think the ST versions actually I preferred. I had better control as well on the ST version. So I'm going to agree with you on that one. The second one, Boat wanted me to have fired up here. Again, this is the Atari ST, but this is the Mega Drive version of this, which I haven't tried. Bo, did you give this one a whirl?
I did, and what they fixed, this is very similar to the Amiga version. Actually, I guess it looks. I take it back. This is more like I should have played these in a separate order so I could work them out in my mind. This is very similar to the ST version. It's sort of a more high-res version than the ST. But it's the view. Your car is definitely bigger on the screen. So but what you lose is the sort of immersiveness of having the gauge cluster on the car.
Yeah.
Instead, that's floating above. And I think that, again, I'm going to give the edge to the ST version. The only thing the Genesis version does better is they cleaned up the track selection, so now you can actually select a track in a way that you normally would. They realized that was a bad move. Looking at the Genesis version, you can tell that the enemy cars are drawn better. There's more detail. There's more detail in the backgrounds. The Genesis is just a more powerful machine. It can just push more than the ST can. But there's still something better in my mind about the speed, the smoothness, and just the overall package of the ST version.
You know, it's funny because there was a sequel to this. The name I don't remember off the top of my head, to F1, and I didn't like it at all. It was on the Genesis, and this is the first time I've seen F1 on there, and I've got to say that I like the ST version better on both. If I'm honest, without playing, just by looking at them. You mentioned, I didn't know if you were going to go into the history of this game at all, Boat. We tried to touch on it real quick. You mentioned that a lot of the game reminded you of pole position. I want to call everybody's attention. There's a video on YouTube called History of Vroom. It's from our buddy Wazabim on his channel, WASABIM. He's a real good guy. I've used a lot of his footage in the past, and he walks in the realm of the odd, sort of like we do on ARG. And he did a great little documentary on this, including an interview with the fellow that made the game, Daniel Macre, however you pronounce it. But his original vision for this game, when he originally programmed this game for the QL of all things, Boat, was he wanted a pole position game. That's what he wanted. And so when he made this game on the QL, he made the original Vroom on the QL, and that's what he was going for, was a pole position game. So I saw some people mention that, like, well, this looks more like pole position F1. The F1 doesn't have lines on the road like road marks. Part of that, I'm sure, is for the illusion of speed, but part of it is this whole game, this whole series came from his love of pole position, and he did the QL version all by himself, and eventually he thought, okay, I'm going to get an ST, and I'm gonna use the extra power of the ST to make this game better. And he did. He said it took him 6 months to make Vroom on the QL. It took him 6 months to make Vroom on the ST. But he started looking at other games on the ST, like Speedball and stuff. And he's like, man, this game it's not as good as the better ST game. So he hooked up with the guys over Lancor to help him do the game. And so he worked a normal job and worked on Zoom or on Vroom on the side, and so did the guys at Lancor. They did all their normal programming and worked on Vroom on the side. And eventually, when it got done, they were like, "Hey, we got something here," And so that's when they started to augment it. Then you got Vroom multiplayer. Then you got Vroom's expansion discs, until ultimately you ended up with this F1. Vroom F1, and then of course it's the sequels going on, but they all stem originally from his love of pole position. Very interesting, and the guy's French, I should mention. But I mean, I got to give the guy credit because he was in it the whole time, and they really took and made something out of this series. I'm real impressed with it, and I hope that we hear more about it in the future, Boat.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, looking at reviews here. ST Review magazine gave it an 87%. That was the only ST magazine I could find that gave it a look, although I'm sure there were more, so they liked it. We got some Discord reviews, if I can pull those up here. We got one review this time around from Salem OK. He says, the first impression of this game is the intro screen, which has the same digital music as Vroom with a new screen. It is clear this game is licensed by the FIA. The other signs are the real names of pilots from the era in the championship mode, and the real sponsors on billboards on the tracks. Apart from that, this game is basically Vroom, or rather a Vroom data disc with some official FIA branding.
Yes.
The game menu is pretty Spartan and a bit weird to use with the mouse, but it is functional and the options are sufficient, although I would have liked an option to use the fire button to accelerate on the joystick.
Yes, absolutely on that.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
To be fair, this was not very popular at the time and makes more sense nowadays. The controls are responsive and precise on both joystick and mouse, although I had the feeling in both cases that you can't steer while you hit the brakes hard. I guess this is kind of realistic, but for arcade racing, it was a pebble in my shoe. This game is extremely smooth and the sensation of speed is great. On the ST, this game is the smoothest and fastest racer I know, and it runs on a vanilla ST with only pure 68,000 power, which is a technical masterpiece. The swoosh sounds when you pass signs, tunnels, or buildings add to this sensation of speed. It's minimalistic, but very efficient. I would complain about the lack of in-game music, but for a Formula One game, I guess it would be out of place. The AI of the cars is okay. They're a bit easier on the nerves than the cars from Lotus or Crazy Cars 2, but still challenging enough for you to be careful about overtaking. All the more as collisions are costing a lot in time, and you also take the risk to break down your car entirely after a while. Played quite a lot on arcade mode. I like the idea of being challenged to overtake a certain number of cars. It's original and it does put pressure on you to take some risks. The championship mode is more classical. My only gripes about championships is that I couldn't figure out how to enter my name and also was not able to use the pit stops to refuel, if that's even possible. So it is possible. Overall, it's a rehash of a great game, so still a great game, just a bit Spartan on the interface and options, but overall one of the very finest racers on the ST. So, yeah, I agree. You know, it is with pitting. What they could have done is they could have just said, if you stop in a pit, you get an on-screen menu that says, what do you want to do? That probably would have been better. And I think that's probably what they do on the Genesis port. But overall, yeah, I think this is a winner.
Yeah, the pitting, you know, remember when we used to play Pit Stop 2 and stuff, and you did that's crazy.
I love that. That's the best part of the game.
It was fun. Yeah, you're right. Boy, aren't you right there. But I mean, that in a game like this, that would break up the game, I think, a little too much. They had to put something in. I'm not saying they did the bare minimum. I think what they did was okay.
Yeah, what they did was okay. All right, Aaron. Well, that's going to take care of F1. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we close things out this time. Big news in the world of the Atari ST Show. This is unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, my last show as host of the Atari ST Show. Several things have transpired in my life that have made it difficult for me to support doing multiple podcasts a week. My wife is opening a restaurant. I have been accepted into the permanent diaconate formation process in the Roman Catholic Church. I'm going to be busy this coming year, and it's just I could still keep doing the shows, but I wouldn't be happy because I wouldn't be able to give them the kind of effort that I know they deserve. So luckily, though, we have a backup plan. Aaron, tell us about what's going on with the future of the Atari ST Show.
Sure. So when Bo told me he was going to have to step down from these shows, we had a choice. We could just get rid of the shows, which I didn't want to really do, or we could try to keep the ball rolling as best we could. And so I contacted the only person I know, well, aside from Bo, within probably 100 miles, maybe further, has any idea what an ST is. And that's my brother, the Brent, who co-hosts ARG Presents and sometimes fills in on these other shows. And so Brent was more than excited to step in to take over the Atari ST Show along with myself. And so starting in September, we will be taking over the Atari ST Show, myself and the Brent. We will be doing the shows on Sunday morning, 10 a.m. It'll be an alternating show because we're also taking over the Coco Show and R. Sinclair, along with our ARG duties. And so we're going to just basically do the shows in sort of in an order, one after the other. We're going to be like every other week will be an ARG, and in between will be one of the other shows. And so it should be a lot of fun. I will say that the Atari ST Show, we probably won't be doing 12 episodes in a year. It'll probably be more like 6 or 7 in a year with the new setup. But we had to basically we had to decide, do we going to get rid of this, or we're going to try to at least keep it going. And so we're all going to try to keep it going. I think actually it'll help in a lot of ways because we have a little more time to look these games over than we've had in the past. But I want to make sure that was out there, that this show is going to be, we're not going to be appearing as much as it has been as a monthly. And so if you decide you want to change the way your Patreon feeds in or whatever, adjust accordingly. If you have any questions about it, please drop me a note at argpresents@mail.com, and we can take any suggestions, comments, whatever, Boat. But I've got an Atari ST setting here, finally. I've got one. So you can be darn sure I'm not going to suddenly drop out of the ST. I've got one sitting here ready to go. So hopefully more Atari ST for me than ever before, Boat. I'm looking forward to digging in. This game was one of the best ones we played on the ST. And so we're off and running here, Boat.
It's onwards and upwards from here, man. I know it. What do we got coming up next time, Aaron?
Let's find out, Boat. I think we're going to find out that we don't know. Yes, because the selection committee has not closed the voting on this. We are maintaining the selection committee. Nothing's going to change, really. This will give those guys more time to come up with nominations for the game we're going to play. We'll probably just open it up completely, Boat. Since me and Brent don't do Amigos, since Brent does, we might just open up to whatever we want and just try everything. So
sure. It
should be a lot of fun. And as soon as we have a game settled on, we'll announce it on Discord so everyone can start practicing up on it.
All right. Sounds good, man. Well, thank you as always for watching for the last time. This is John, Boat of Carshaller, signing off, saying make sure you play
your Atari today. Do it.
The Atari ST Show is made possible by contributions from listeners like you. Patreon supporters help choose the games we play, receive exclusive magnets, and get access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server. Visit patreon.com/Atari ST Show if you'd like to support the show and join our community.